My guest this week is Jerry A. Lang. Jerry started playing in bands on the Portland punk scene in 1979, and his first recording was a live record with the band Smegma on the 10/29/79 LP, which also featured the Neo Boys and the Wipers. He then went on to found Portland's first hardcore punk band, Poison Idea, who started in 1980 and retired in 2018. He wrote his memoirs in 2021, Black Heart Fades Blue, and has also released a new solo record with the Kings of Oblivion from Amsterdam, on the label that he has been president and founder of since 1989, American Leather Records. This is their 31st release, with no signs of slowing down. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to Revolutions Per Movie, Jerry A. Lang. Hi, Jerry.
Hey, Chris. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great.
I was thinking about how lucky I was as a teenager having a band like Poison Idea in my life in this city. You know, looking back at old calendars and how the bands would play twice a month at Satyricon. I felt so lucky that this was my gateway into punk rock. Seeing your band and the Crucifix and the Dead Kennedys and, even the Cramps. And the film we're talking about, Decline of Western Civilization, was shot in 79 and 80. And that's just right when you were getting started. So leading up to this, what were your first punk show experiences?
Well, I mean, you said you were lucky, but I felt I was luckier because when those shows were coming through Portland, Tom Pig was the one booking them at Satyricon. And so, the Crucifix would call him up, or, Youth Brigade would call him up, and these bands would call Tom up. And so he passed on some of them. I mean, like Raw Power came, and Tom, they stayed at his house, and the next morning they stayed there for like 3 days. And Tom was like, well, you know what? You guys have been here for 3 days eating at my house. Before you leave, I want you to go down to the basement and we have our setup down there. Go down there and play a set for us. So we get to see Raw Power in our basement, and stuff like that. It's like really intimate. And we got spoiled. We weren't at the Olympic Auditorium with,
right,
thousands of people. We were, 30 people in a room and seeing, whoever. It was great. So, I mean, the first shows that I saw when I was a kid, I moved to Portland from Eugene right when the new art center was going on Division Street. Let me see, the Avengers played already, the Weirdos played already. I think the Zeros played at Portland State. A bunch of California bands were coming up because they were going to Vancouver and Seattle, so they would stop here. But the first show I saw was the Wipers' first Portland show when they opened up for Ice Nine.
Oh, wow. That's Danny D from Miracle Workers band, right?
Yeah. And so that was, and they were, kind of long hair, flared jeans,
Right.
Dave had his cowboy boots on. So, I mean, Portland was a real DIY, we realized, like Devo City type stuff. And
so true.
the people didn't dig it. I mean, Wipers were just phenomenal, but I don't think fashion wise, it didn't go over too well, but that was my very first show I saw. And then after that, I just started seeing everything that I could, and we had Joe Carducci from, Renaissance Records here doing his K-Boo show. So it was, it wasn't, as far as the feeling, it wasn't like a Los Angeles vibe or a San Francisco vibe, but we got the magazines and the records, a week later.
Right.
I remember, when Tooth and Nail or whatever, the Danger House singles would come out, we had them too, like right away. So it was really great,
Yeah, I was talking to Katie Kincaid from the Neo Boys about people were just putting on these shows, Sten and her and Tom. And then all of a sudden they'd have like one show and Portland State University would be like, banned. You're not having a punk rock show here ever again. And it'd be like something not even like that dangerous in my mind. But do you remember it just being as scrappy as she was talking about in terms of like venues and access and kind of the DIY aesthetic?
Well, yeah, I mean, the bands and the people might as well have been from Mars. They come in and if it was like the Oddfellows Hall in Northwest or Southwest, and they would have Pere Ubu. And, it was a nice big hall, and people would come in and put a cigarette out on the floor or whatever, and, scratch up the floor. And that was it. That was
right.
Never again at the Oddfellows Hall. But then they would go to the next hall down the street, and something would happen, a window would get broke. And so, and it's not even if the place got, trash or not trash, but if there was an accident, people just looked. The sound and the look was enough to scare any, people. Like I said, people weren't used to it here at all.
Even the local journalism was so down on it. They were just like, this is garbage. The people are garbage. And they're talking about like the wipers.
Yeah. And by the time, by the time Sato Nation and Napalm Beach and those bands were around putting out records, they were on that television show with the AM Northwest thing, and the guys on there, the hosts were just like, treating the people like freaks, and it was, by then it was kind of the norm.
Yes.
They had all the college radio stuff was going on everywhere, but we, just like anything, that the Pacific Northwest is the last frontier for, look towards the East for the fashion, for the sounds, for the style, for everything. And it all comes this way. And this is the very last spot you can go until you go into the ocean, pretty much with everything. And it might as well be for culture too, because it's like, we're still up here, rocking out to Paul Revere and the Raiders, and here come the wipers.
Well, even in Mark Sten's book, I had no idea because, I was too young for this, but they had like kind of a union type situation where we'd put the money in and, it would all go into a pot so that we could put on the next show and pay out the bands properly and be like, okay, no, you opened for the Dead Kennedys last time. It's somebody else's turn. And that seemed to go away around like 80, 81. But I just couldn't believe how, keeping notes on, like a treasurer of a punk rock scene is just, I think that's pretty unique to Portland, right?
I guess you have to do it, if you take a business school and you try to run some kind of a company. I experienced it and I lived through it. And when Sten did his book release, he asked me to be on the panel at Powell's Books. And I was sitting there with him and I was looking at the book, and all of a sudden, 40 years later, it dawned on me. We had all ages shows or no shows. The whole punk community was just, I did, like I said, I didn't know how lucky I was. I was just like, this is, it was really great. And I just totally, I didn't take advantage of it. I just took it for granted. I just didn't, I was like, oh, another show.
Same here.
Smash the bottle, whatever. Yeah. And it was really lucky. And they ran it like a Swiss watch,
No, it was amazing. I played with Poison Idea and Raw Power. It was like I think my second show I ever played in my life. And just to be involved in a scene like that was incredible. And, you had the 13th Precinct and Z Club, which lasted like a week. And, Satyricon at that time was all ages. The kids would come through the back. And if you were in the bar, you'd come through the front. And then the Pine Street. It was just for a scene that didn't have too many bands. It was kind of remarkable how much access we had to things coming in. There were bands that would definitely skip Portland.
Sure.
But we were getting a lot of the groundwork that a lot of the punk bands were doing, SST and things like that, Minutemen, Husker Du, Black Flag. But I feel like, some bands just didn't come through.
If they didn't stop here, they definitely went to Seattle and Vancouver, like the Undertones. So we had to go up there and see them,
right.
Or the Clash in Vancouver or whatever. So, but, it's not that far. It's a train ride, but still it's a pain in the ass. And, but yeah, we were lucky. And you know what? I watched your BYO thing, and the tour did not play here, but they did stop here. They stopped here, and there was a big party, and I remember sitting on the bus and getting drunk with those people.
Yeah, Lisa was wondering. She's like, it says Portland in a little flash, but it's like there were speculations that show may not have happened.
Well, you know what? Where they were supposed to play was at this place on 23rd up in North, the Cafe Oasis. They had one show. Well, they had a couple of small local shows, and then they had Vice Squad, and that was it. They were just like, no more shows.
Yeah, no, it happened all the time. I remember going to the Z Club and being like, oh, this is amazing. And a week later, it's gone. It's just like gone. But you have a calendar in front of you. You're like, wait, I'm not going to get to see Lydia Lunch? How dare you? Do you think with Decline that this film could have been made about any other music scene at this time?
You know what? Looking at that movie with fresh eyes, coming back and watching it again, just like Sten's book, all of a sudden stepping back and taking a look at from a distance and going, aha, my moment of clarity. The Decline, I looked at it and was listening to it, and I was like, this is a big pre-MTV video commercial for Slash Records.
Robert Biggs, who did Slash Magazine,
Yeah.
which I loved. I forgot that Slash Records was his.
Yeah, and he was married to Penelope Spheris.
Oh, I had no idea. There you go. So yeah, you got the Germs on Slash, you got X on Slash, you got
Fear.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really weird. I was, doing like research for this and stuff. I talked to some people, and I talked to Cliff from the Weirdos, and he was like, yeah, we were supposed to be on that. And we were like supposed to be the last band filmed, and they were like, you're on, you're off, you're on. And then the night they were shooting was you're off. And I said, well, did you guys get, did Slash Records ever come to you? And he's like, no, they weren't interested in us. So that right there. And I was like, that's kind of my gripe with the movie. Is like, there's so many better bands that could have been on. I mean, I liked most of the bands, but, the Zeros, the Weirdos, the Screamers. Come on, if that would have been on there, that would have just been,
Black Randy.
Oh, that would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was, our whole thing was we were like Germ fanatics, because when I was like in the stand a couple years before Poison Idea started, or a year before, whatever, a bunch of LA hoodlums came up and ran away from Los Angeles because they were in like some hot water down there, and they were all Germ people. So we came up here, and they were living here, and they were just telling us all the dirt, and it was like gossip too, and it was really, really hairy, seedy, hardcore. We're like, wow, and this blew our 16-year-old minds, but we loved it. So so right away, and then that Germs record came out that year too, the first one, the album, and we were just, that's it. We're just like, we're full in, and so when the movie came out, that's the closest thing we were going to get to see the Germs.
What cinema did you see it in Portland? Was it like Fifth Avenue or?
It was at Fifth Avenue.
Okay.
Fifth Avenue.
I had a
people
feeling.
were like, yeah, and people were like treating it like a gig, and like dancing in the aisles and like smashing up the bathrooms and stuff. And it's kind of funny, but it was kind of pathetic. And I mean, there was like these like, college kids there and stuff, and they had no idea what was going on. People were like actually getting up on the stage and jumping off the stage during this movie and stuff. And it was like, what the hell's going on? It's like Rocky Horror,
Oh, that's so innocent. Yeah, when I remember seeing Dance Craze at Cinema 21, same thing. People dancing, trying to be all ska down the aisle, being like madness. Going to see those films, they weren't on videotape. You kind of had to like memorize it. You had to take it in and just devour it. And also it's kind of amazing, of course, with the Slash thing, there was a soundtrack immediately available,
right,
that you could find in most record stores across the nation. It was easier to find that record than to see the movie.
Yes, the soundtrack was here for like a year before. So when we were familiar with everything, and then when like 6 months later, when it played in Eugene, Oregon, they actually had Poison Idea open for the movie at this place in Eugene. So we set up on stage right at this theater, and we're doing the whole shtick. It's like kind of like a Catskills, like a Don Rickles. We're doing the whole thing, like, hey, they let all you long hairs in here tonight? What's the problem? And we're like doing this from the Decline.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we're like doing and of course our set got broke up with a big fight, and in the movie theater there was like some big giant fight. And we got thrown out. And then the movie comes on. And the first thing is like, hey, why'd they let all you long hairs in here tonight? People are like, is this like deja vu? What's going on? I've seen this movie before.
It is funny. I mean, you're bringing me back a bit. I do remember having to be careful of like, there's some heavy metal dudes walking towards us. There was some danger to Portland in terms of if you were new wave or punk or whatever, there were definite tribes in terms of like, some shit could go down. Am I imagining that wrong?
There was a giant fight at the premiere of The Decline out in front. There's a lineup around the block, and 4 or 5 people like PSU football players came down, thought they could take on this line of people, and they got their asses handed to them. They came through and they got chased and pounded. So it's just, because I guess, people, those kids were used to getting beat for so long, and then safety in numbers.
It's funny. The film starts with Eugene, the skinhead, the black and white iconic footage with the, lone empty light bulb hanging above. He says, it's not bullshit. There's no rock stars, which I don't necessarily know if that's true with punk rock. I feel like there are a lot of rock stars.
Sure.
And a lot of like dreams to levitate up. And you watch the movie and it's full of people who are super charismatic and know how to play to the camera.
Soup kitchen rock stars.
Totally. And then, of course, the first band in it is Black Flag. And do you remember getting the early Black Flag EPs? Like, what was your impression of those?
Well, that version of Black Flag played at the Long Goodbye in Portland. They came up here as Ron Reyes and played. And so I saw that version. You watch that movie now, and the energy, it's just can't contain it. It's so explosive. And I remember watching it when I was 16 and 17, and I felt it, and I watched it now, 40 years later, and I'm like, wow, that's still just amazing. It's still, it still is. So that's saying something. That's saying something. It didn't lose its kick after 40 years. So that's really saying something.
Chuck and Greg, just watching how they played and just such abandon. And I mean, you know me, I like to play my angles on a guitar. I don't know my scales. I guess a lot. It's all because of Greg Ginn and Mike Watt. They seem to just be going nuts, and it doesn't really matter if it's a little off.
Sure.
I really loved just the sound of Black Flag.
Yeah, channel that feeling, and if you can do that, that's it explodes, and that's what they were doing, and that's what got us off, and that's what we wanted to do too. We wanted to emulate that, the ferociousness of Black Flag, and the nihilistic cry of pain of the Germs. That's what we were, because they were like the first, like that guy. They were kind of like the first emo band, really. The Darby just crying, they really were. So that was, that's what got us off. So,
I feel like I heard hardcore before I heard traditional punk, right? Because of my age, right? So I was hearing you and, Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and all this stuff. And then going back and finding the Clash and Sex Pistols. And it was like, whoa, okay, rock and roll. Like,
yeah, what's all this slow stuff?
Right. But do you remember things that like hit your ear that made you want to move into like hardcore music versus like a more traditional early punk sound?
Well, I'm a lot older than you, so I heard like the Ramones when I was a little kid, and that got me into the traditional punk for a long time. And then I got, moved to Portland, started a couple of bands. And I was used to it, and I could understand what it meant. And it wasn't like, it didn't like freak me out or scare me anymore, like whatever the undertones or whatever. And then like the Fall came out and Joy Division, and especially No Wave. When the No Wave thing came out, that just, I couldn't understand that, and it scared the shit out of me. And I was like, this is dangerous. This is the new thing. So I remember like selling my leather jacket and putting on it, like, dressed like James Chance and being like,
cool.
And thinking this was the new, because it was like this weird, like just scary, Joy Division, man, come on. And you can't,
right.
And I was riding on that train for a long time. I remember meeting Tom when we started, and we were like, what kind of bands are you into? And he's like, oh, I like the Killjoys and Menace and this, all these bands. He's like, what are you into? I'm like, The Fall and, Scream Police. And he's like, what's that crap? And he's like, that's garbage. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's real. I'm trying to turn him on to it. And he's just, all the guys are laughing at me and stuff. And then Black Flag came out and that stuff. And, DOA was always here. But they, they were more of a rock band when they started. Then they started speeding it up. And then when the hardcore thing exploded, it was then again, okay, now this is the dangerous stuff.
Right.
This is the new stuff. And I thumbed my nose at James Chance.
But it's interesting because I know the Germs, they mean a lot to you.
Well, like I said, it was being, just in awe of the scariness of them. They were just so, like I said, we had those people come up and tell us the whole story, and then you read the lyrics, American leather. It's like, Darby's talking about being into leather and men. And like, you never find him kneeling, and then and all this, and the drugs, and he really can't come out because he's, it's such a homophobic scene, and this, and it's just like painful to listen to, and it's just so powerful. There's nothing, we always wanted to be like, take like half the Germs, like the lyricalness of the Germs, and the power of like the sonic boom of like Discharge, just the explosion,
Totally.
and put those two together, and and then just like I say, the ferociousness of Black Flag, and it's like the biggest things. They're just like, the two atomic bombs going off at once, and so yeah, the Germs were really, and and the whole thing with Darby, enlivening himself at the end, just like Ian Stewart and or Ian Curtis, excuse me. Whoa, what a faux pas. So yeah, that just was, it was heavy, because I remember being like in the Long Goodbye, and Jeff from the Ziplocs went down there to see the last Germ show, and we were sitting at the Long Goodbye, and that's when I was like 16. I could drink in a bar. It's crazy in Portland. And Jeff comes back, and he's like, Darby Crash killed himself, like that, and everybody's just like, whoa, like what? And we had the record, we knew it, we were into, myself, I like the Tooth and Nail stuff. I like the Germs, like Tooth and Nail. I thought that sounded like it was from like Mars. I could not, to this day, the mix of that is so insane. But
It is.
but anyway, man, it was just like such a, because he was like our peer, we could relate to him. Like Black Flag was like the people's band at that time.
Sure.
With Ron and Dez, and the Germs were like the people's, they were like the Pied Pipers of the fucked up kids, the runaways and stuff. We were all, so yeah, it was heartbreaking. So that's just, that's kind of why they, made such a big deal to us.
One thing that's interesting about the film is obviously the economics of LA were still dirt cheap. They're talking about living in these cubby holes for just change. And I feel like there was a point where Portland was very similar, very cheap town to get by, have beer money, and be able to buy records and live with a ton of weirdos in a pretty awesome big house.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that's come up quite a bit, is just the economics of a music scene.
Well, I mean, it's shaped who I became, kind of like a spoiled brat. I mean, it's like it was true. It was like, it was, and it was safe back then, and it was a different world. It was a totally different world. I mean, it wasn't safe in the, I mean, like I say, the Cowboys would beat you up, or the Rednecks would beat you up, but yeah, the everybody living in a house for a $300 a month house,
I know.
and you get 5 people, and you can get plasma. I remember there was a house down on 12th in like Stark, this big punk house, and there's like 4 people that lived there, and one of the people would give plasma, and that was her whole, to survive and live at this house. She just gave plasma once a week, and that paid her rent.
I mean, at one point, I worked with 4 members of Poison Idea on Hot Lips Pizza on Swan Island, which is this industrial place, and it was you, myself, Slayer Hippie, Mondo, and Vegetable. And these workers would come in who had been up, since 4 a.m. doing all this dock work and stuff. And we're just standing there, creatures, just giving out pizza, mostly eating for free, being really tired. But I could have a job like that and live in the Hell Cow house with people from Death Magent and the Hell Cows and not know 2 of the people who lived there, like never see them. Because it was just so big, and you're living a block away from these amazing movie theaters and record stores. I feel really fortunate that, I could walk to clubs, and I could go to Quality Pie 24 hours after the show. Those were really formative things.
Yeah, and like, if you, I remember standing outside of shows, because I couldn't get in. I didn't have the $2 or whatever, or I decided to buy, a giant bottle of Old English. And so I'd stand outside and when right before George opened Satyricon, when he had the Acropolis on Burnside right there, I remember him bringing the Violent Femmes there and standing in front of that window, and I'm like standing right behind the drummer, but there's a pane of glass. I'm just watching him drinking beer on the sidewalk. And that was, that's the way the shows used to be.
What were your influences in terms of like putting out your own stuff? Because to me, as somebody who was just in bands that were making cassettes and stickers, to see bands actually put out vinyl just seemed impossible. And I had no idea that this was your own label when I was a kid. I didn't know you were doing it yourself. I thought you'd been chosen,
Yeah. Yeah. We did a Columbia record house record deal. We sent away a penny and we got 8 records in the mail for free. So no, you know what? It was, there was that band, the Desperate Bicycles from England, and they did that single where they had the insert and it showed how to record a record, how to get it mastered, and how to press it.
Wow.
A 7-inch record for like $300 back in those days. And the thing that, the Discord people said too about getting a record and taking it apart. I mean, we actually did that. We would call up like Rainbow or whoever, and it was completely DIY. We'd get the records made. We would just ask people, and we sat and hand glued every, single sleeve, and we'd stuff them ourselves, and we'd put them in sleeves, and we, hand stamp them and everything. And so it was really, we'd have parties. We'd have people come over and have stuffing parties, and
right,
everybody get drunk. But it was really, it was, that thing that the Discord where they would say they took a record and took it apart and drew out the template of it to fold it over to glue together. That's exactly what we did.
And how many would you press then? I mean, they sold pretty well, right?
Yeah, I mean, not really well, just a couple thousand here and there.
Okay.
But it was all mail order, and we had a post office box, and we put out ads, Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside, and we would, it was before the internet. So we'd have to write letters and, make phone calls and soap the stamps as they used to do. They used to, soap and stamps and making phone calls with credit card, like stolen credit cards. They had those like call cards where they'd call a number like long distance and it'd go, please enter your number now. And you would dial this like 9-digit credit card number. Like families would buy their kids when they go to college to like call home with credit cards. So they'd get hot ones. People would send them around. They're like, hey, I got a new number for you. And you get it and you would call. And,
wow.
Yeah. Like whole tours were like lined up like that, back in the days.
Well, I remember just blindly sending money to like Wax Trax Records in Chicago, just being like, oh, they say they have this record in stock. It's in the back of this magazine. Here's $3.50 for this 7-inch. And then you just would wait. And then like maybe you'd forget about it. And like 7 or 8 months later, it would show up and you're like, oh, right. I'm no longer interested in this anymore. I actually heard it and it sucked, but it was funny. Yeah. Just sending like just things in the mail, just being like, I'm just going to fold this up really tightly in this thing and no one will know what's in here.
Yeah, the audio equivalency of sea monkeys.
Right. Well, we're talking about also how Slash is so predominant in this film. Did you ever like want to be on a label like that? Was that ever an aspiration, or was it just never your deal?
We got on a few one offers here and there.
Mm-hmm.
The Sub Up thing and the Tang thing and the Vinyl Solution thing and the Alchemy thing and stuff like that. They're all one-time deals, and they all pretty much knew there was one time. And then, recently somebody asked, like, did you ever think that you guys would ever like be, once like the Nirvana stuff started breaking, did you ever think you would be, even though Kurt did the one thing for Sassy magazine, and he like told them that, put us as the hunk of the month or whatever, that was more of a joke, but we were just like, no, we knew. I mean, by that time, we took the the Germs torch, and we ran with it. We turned it up, we amped it like times 5. We like
Yes.
whatever they were doing. We like, like if Darby never died, we would have been hanging out with us smoking crack, So,
I saw it. I definitely saw
yeah.
you guys running towards the light. When you watch the footage of the Germs now in this film, like, how is it hitting you from when you saw it when you were young?
Well, now that I'm older again, the same thing. I can understand what all these people. There's a part in the decline where it shows this one guy, and he looks like he's losing his mind. He's screaming at these people, and he looks very upset. And I used to think, wow, that's really cool. Look how angry that guy is. Look how angry that guy is. But I know now that oh, when people are really, really angry, they're usually really, really sad too. So I'm looking at this guy and I go, that guy's really fucked up and sad, even though he's screaming at somebody. And that's the way I look at the Germs too. I say that's, there's a reason why these people are doing this. There's a reason why, so not, it's nothing I would like to become, So, it was weird. It's weird watching that. And like I say, the black flag thing comes on and it's just like so explosive and it blows your mind. And then the X thing, and you're like, okay, this is like, rock and roll. And then and they're like talking and stuff. And then the Catholic discipline comes on. You're like, wow, this is like almost like Camus or Sartre or something. It's like kind of like
It's really
these, like,
weird.
yeah, and it's like poetry. And then it's like, that's the thing that kind of hooked you. You went there to get the free taste, but then you're like, wow, this is interesting. These guys are there's more to this than, it's like these guys are smart. These guys are really, like when they're in the Slash office and they're reading the letters,
Yes.
you know.
Kick boy face. That magazine, Thor, who owned Singles Going Steady, would give me his Slash magazines and the New York Rockers and his trouser presses when he was done with them. Made such an impression on me. I loved Slash magazine.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, like, I dropped out of school when I was like 14, and it was the Search and Destroys
Yep.
and the Slashes, and those were like, they taught you about politics, they taught you about cinema, they taught you about literature. They'd have Philip K. Dick, they'd have Bukowski, they'd have all these like writers, and they'd have these like, Japanese filmmakers, and they'd have all this stuff and everything plus the music. So they were kind of like, not so much as Maximum Rock and Roll, where they really did push an agenda, but it was kind of a one-sided thing. Slash kind of left it up there to make up your own mind. It's like, here's this. What do you think of this? So it was great. Yeah, and Search and Destroy too. It was very political and very like, fuck the mayor, this kind of stuff, and let's burn down California and this kind of shit. But it made you think, and it was like, wow, this stuff's really cool. And it's like being a kid reading this, it was kind of like my school book, And there will be a test on this after this.
We'll talk about J.G. Ballard and Gary
exactly.
Panther. Gary Panther. I mean, that was true. I mean, it's like the first underground comics of my generation, seeing Jimbo, and they were hard to find.
Yeah, you had to look for stuff. It wasn't at your fingertips like the internet. You had to, find this stuff. You had to search for it.
Yeah, so if you're reading something about Russ Meyer, you're like, where do I see a Russ Meyer film? Like, how do I get access to this?
Yeah, and they'd have all that stuff, John Waters stuff, all that, So it was really, yeah, that whole world was it was made for me.
But yeah, I feel really naive that I did not, till I watched this again recently, and they just say, Robert Biggs does Slash record.
Well, Chris, like I said, honestly, it just dawned on me. It was so weird. I was like, aha, my aha moment. I was like, this thing, and then I was like, well, she's married to this guy, and I was like, no wonder. It's like,
Yeah.
Executive producer, and I was like, well, there you go. And it's like, and it was really a smart move. It was really good because, wow, those, you talk about Frontier Records. I mean, those Slash records, and their roster was like, the Gun Club, the Violent Femmes, Dream Syndicate,
Yep.
The Germs, just on and all this, just all over the board. So,
yeah. And also seeing a band like Catholic Discipline, I just remember there being like so many, not so many, but, Portland had its share of like art, weirdo, new wave punk things, and I remember being like, I kind of like it. Yeah. But it's really fun to see Catholic Discipline because they really stand out. They're just kind of alone. You got Frank and you got Elvez and you got
Yeah.
Kickboy Face singing. And like you said, it just definitely has
a hipster beat vibe.
Yeah. And his accent definitely helps. Like everything he says sounds smart. And he's very smart. Like those interviews with him are great. With him and Brendan Mullen, with his Scottish accent talking about the scene. When did Poison Idea first play LA? What was that like?
Well, we would go down to San Francisco, and that was far enough for us. we went down there a bunch of times. We didn't start going down to LA until like the late 80s.
Okay.
And by then it was, it was like none of those people were, actually a couple of those kids, the South Bay kids that were in, the young kids were still kind of around. When we would go down there, all the kids from the third decline, they were all over there. I met all those people, but that Eugene kid, he came up here like not too long after the decline. He was doing something, but he came up to Portland, and like I said, we kind of ran into those people through the years. But LA was completely different by the time we went down there. It was just like, the whole crossover thing already exploded. And it was just like, when that was going on, it was pretty big. The Fleetwood. I talked to somebody. I was talking to Melissa Hutton, from the girl from the Germs, and she was saying that she said the Fleetwood was the death of punk.
Okay.
That just means, that was the testosterone and the guys coming in and stuff,
Okay. Right.
And something else she told me, it was really funny too. In the decline, it shows her and Lorna Doom, and they're being interviewed, Melissa Hutton and Lorna. And she said there's a part they didn't put in there. It was really, she said it was pretty cool that Penelope asked them, they're holding up the Germs record, and Penelope asked them, she goes, what does the blue circle mean? And at the exact same time, Lorna and Melissa said, nothing, everything. One said nothing and one said everything. One goes, everything, nothing. The exact same time.
So good.
Yeah. And she goes, I don't know why they didn't put that in the movie.
Right. Did a band like X or Fear resonate with you?
You mean bands from the movie?
Yeah. Like for me, like when I got the Fear record, it sounded really pro. It was like, I couldn't, It was so, I don't know, it was like punk rock, bar rock kind of for me, to my ears, after hearing things that were already so weird, because that was sitting next to then like Duck Stab by the Residents at this point. You know what I mean? So next to it, it didn't seem that dangerous to me. I know those guys could also kick my ass, but
Well, it doesn't make it better or worse, but you watch that and you watch Black Flag and you go, well, these people knew how to play before punk.
Right.
X, these people knew how to play. The Germs, they probably started playing, and that's true. They started playing when they didn't know. Poison Idea, we did not know how to play at all. We learned from sitting down and playing along with these records, with the Black Flag record. And Catholic Discipline, it sounded like they barely could hold it together too. They barely knew how to play. Fear, they knew how to play. Those guys had their chops down, and they were probably playing in some bar rock, a couple of years before punk ever came around. So they knew what they were doing, and it didn't fool me. I'm like, these guys were like roadie for Blue Oyster Cult back in the day, So it's like, they were powerful. I give them that much, but I didn't. I never owned a Fear record.
No, it was not. I got it, but I was not into it. And I loved X, but again, it was a totally different need for me than like you said, Raw Power record or a Dayglow Abortions record or whatever, or a Crucifix record. Those were the things that I was gravitating towards. And then the touch and go stuff, of course, started coming in with Scratch Acid and Big Black. Sometimes I just was like, oh, they're just too good. Like these songs are amazing. Like X could write a song. They were incredible. They sounded, lyrics are great, amazing vocals together.
Yeah. It was, I saw X recently, and they're a Billy Soup's up there playing his saxophone now, and DJ comes back and does this marimba thing,
Yeah.
and they're just like, look at these guys, like Lawrence Welk, you know. It's like these guys are they're very professional. They were back then, and they are now. And there's a reason why they got signed and their records did well, because they're not fucking around. They're really good.
But like the Flesh Eaters, on the other hand, which would pull members of them, that was like the things that were really.
See, why weren't the Flesh Eaters in the decline? That would have been amazing.
I
That would have
agree.
been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would have been amazing. Were you a fan of like the Circle Jerks at all?
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, we knew, Keith from the first Black Flag record, and then the Circle Jerks came out, and it was like I said, that's when like we thought hardcore was dangerous, and it was like this stuff. These 30-second songs are great.
Yeah,
that's what we were young and jumping around and stuff, and so I think when we started, before we ever did a record or anything, we would, like I said, we'd play along to these records, and we even covered a Circle Jerk song off that first record.
Wow.
I forgot which one it was. Red Tape, that's what it was.
Oh,
yeah,
amazing.
we did that.
Yeah, they played that in the movie.
Yeah, so maybe that's where we learned it from. but like, imitation and flattery. It's like that's what got us off, and so
Well,
we like that.
I mean, it's so funny. I did the same thing. I learned, one of my first bass lines was "Time to Go." Just learning things. Just like I figured it out. And then turning to the left and being like, all right, now I got to learn Bob Dylan wrote propaganda songs by the Minutemen. You're like, okay, let's try this,
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, exactly.
But I remember playing parties, and we would do like Red Tape, and we had like maybe 4 or 5 original songs, and we would do like Pop Tones by PIL. So we had like a lot of, different influences still. Like that was still. Didn't do any contortion songs. I couldn't talk the guys into doing that. Couldn't talk me into doing that. I think we tried. I remember we were fooling around with like a Gang of Four song. So, we had so much good stuff back then. There was so much good stuff to choose from. It was like you say, I started thinking when you said the Flesh Eaters, I was like, yeah, what? When the Controllers, UXA, yes. Rick L. Rick, Negative Trim. Why were these bands? There are so many bands. And I'm like, oh, it's Slash Records Party. I forgot. I keep forgetting it's Slash Records invite only,
It is a pretty amazing, for what it is, a pretty amazing looking and sounding film. They capture it pretty well. It was a really important film for me at the time because there was Erg, there was this film, and then there was New Wave Theater on cable, which was Peter Ivor's show, where you would see a lot of the same people like Circle Jerks and Fear. But they would often have more also arty things involved, But that's where I first saw the Plugs and other things.
Joanna Wentz.
Yes, exactly.
That footage of her was really something really great. I was an instant fan when I saw it. I was like, I got to find more about this stuff. So I'm a fan of her still.
Yeah, but it was getting access to it was limited. And so, again, seeing this film in a movie theater and then later, being able to find it on VHS tape, like, maybe you'd get lucky and find a store that had a bunch of exercise videotapes and then one music film, UFO Live, and then this film next to it,
Yeah. I found a tape once at like a Goodwill or something. It was really weird. It was a VHS, a big tape of all the Beatles cartoons.
Yeah.
And it had like a cover with the Beatles cartoons on it. And I was watching it, and it was, Beatles cartoons. But then right towards the end, somebody taped over it and taped all this really hardcore G.G. Allin stuff. So it just blew my mind. I was like, this stuff this really crazy stuff where he like ties this guy up to a tree and does all this crazy shit. And I was like, what the? And I was like, why would somebody like that? Oh, it's a Beatles cartoon, But it was really strange. It was really strange that I found this like in a Goodwill,
That was like made for you, like those two coming together, just like the fact of finding it in a Goodwill, the content you wanted and the content you got. That's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
I just like the idea of somebody being like, there's a good chance they accidentally taped over it and they're probably pissed. And that's why I went to Goodwill.
Yeah.
They're like, damn it. my stupid brother taped the fucking Beatles over my GG Tree stuff.
You know what? I sent it to Steve from Red Cross, and he never said anything about it. He never responded. I was like, I got this great tape for you, and I sent it, and he just like silence.
Oh my God. At the end of every interview, I like to ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on the film we're talking about. So on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how many bare light bulbs hanging above you do you give this film on a scale from 1 bare light bulb to 10 bare light bulbs?
Wow. See, again, it depends on what time of the day you ask me this question. It's like if it's the black flag, it's like a 9. If it's how it held up after all these years and stuff, it's probably a 3. So let's do like say 6.
A 6. Let's just say it's on a dimmer. And you can you can switch it to 9 when it needs to be, and you could go down to 3.
There we go. You know what? It didn't really. It's powerful when it needs to be, but it didn't really hold up. It's like Once I realized how it was just like kind of set up.
Are you a fan of the second or third sequels?
Not really.
People sure love the second one. I remember it being really fun to see in the theater.
I never liked that genre at all. I never liked that genre. Yeah. And by the time the third one came out, I was already into the Smiths or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Jerry, this was amazing. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you. And again, I will say it again. I was a lucky teenager to have so much musical access to Poison Idea. It was so powerful, and it obviously influenced my first band, as you know, and onwards, and even Mustache that came out 10 years ago and things like that. It was all because I loved 2 bands. I loved Die Kreuzen and I loved Poison Idea, and I wanted to be those 2 back then. So,
well, it makes me proud.
Yeah. Thanks again, Jerry.
Thanks.
It was great.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday. We are a completely independently produced affair, so the best way to support us is to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app and to subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get exclusive weekly bonus episodes every Sunday, as well as one-of-a-kind handmade Revolutions Per Movie goods that I send out to you. You can follow the show on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and find more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!